Hey guys, tonight we drift quietly down one of the oldest, most storied rivers in the world, the Nile. You're curled up on a simple wooden boat, rocked gently by the slow-moving current. The air is still soft with the night's coolness, and a pale orange dawn stretches lazily across the eastern sky, painting the riverbanks in sleepy gold. There's a rhythmic splash. Your oarsman, already awake, is humming something low and ancient. Birds flutter overhead, and you catch a glimpse of a long-legged heron wading through the shallows. You're not dreaming, but it feels like it. The scent in the air is a mix of damp reeds, wet earth, and, well, something you hope is just fish. A light breeze dances across your skin, sticky with sleep and yesterday's dust. Your bed was a pile of woven mats, and your pillow was, honestly, not good. But you made it through the night, so congratulations. Of course, there's still the crocodiles, and the heat, and the hippos, and the fact that if you're not from here, you probably wouldn't survive a week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all watching from. Now, put on your headphones or turn down the music. Maybe turn on the fan for some soft background music. And let's take a journey back to ancient times in the most authentic way possible. The boat nudges gently away from the bank, guided by the practiced hands of your boatman. You sit up slowly, stretching sore muscles as the gentle splash of oars fills your ears. Your guide, a wiry man with the sun-baked skin of someone who hasn't seen shade since the reign of Ramses, nods at you without a word. He's chewing something green, possibly an herb, possibly a bug. You decide not to ask. You're heading south. Yes. South is up the Nile in Egypt. Geography is weird here. The river flows north from the highlands of Africa down into the Mediterranean, so the deeper you go into Egypt, the more upstream you are. Welcome to ancient logic. The sun peaks higher, turning the dark river into a sheet of molten bronze. On your left, the east bank catches the morning light, the land of the living, sacred to the sun god Ra. To the west, shadows cling stubbornly to the necropolis, the land of the dead. You don't mention that part out loud. A low hill rises in the distance, dotted with ancient tombs, half swallowed by sand. That's where the nobles sleep, your guide mutters. Mostly. You're not sure if he's joking. He's not smiling. A flock of ibis takes off beside you, their wings beating in perfect silence. It's the kind of moment that makes you forget modern life entirely, until you remember you haven't had coffee. At all. Not even a hint. What you do get is a warm mug of fermented barley water. It's thick. It's tangy. It's not coffee. But you smile and drink it anyway, because you're polite and also dehydrated. Nearby, a small canoe carved from a single log floats by, carrying a boy no older than 10. He's got a bundle of fish tied to his belt, and he waves at you like you're the morning entertainment. His paddle is more a stick than a proper tool, but he moves faster than you do. Fish for breakfast? Your guide offers, pointing at the boy. You decline. Raw fish and barley sludge before 7 a.m.? You're not that adventurous yet. A group of water buffalo lounges on the bank, neck deep in mud, swatting flies with impressive tail coordination. One stares at you like it knows something you don't, possibly how to survive out here. As the boat glides on, the river narrows slightly, flanked by walls of papyrus so dense they look like you could walk across them. You run your fingers through the fronds as they brush the sides of the boat. Soft, wet, and surprisingly fragrant. Ancient Egyptians made everything out of papyrus. Scrolls, sails, sandals, even makeup brushes. But did you know they also used it to make contraceptives? Yep. Historians still argue whether papyrus tampon hybrids were used for comfort, contraception, or both. Let's just say medicine was experimental back then. The boatmen break into a slow chant, a rowing rhythm passed down through generations. You don't understand the words, but the sound wraps around you like a lullaby made of river and sky. You're not sure whether to nap or weep. "Don't drink the river," one of the boatmen says, interrupting the moment. "The crocodiles mark their territory." You assume he's kidding. You really hope he's kidding. The sun climbs higher. The heat arrives not like a slap, but like a lazy cat, stretching, curling around your body, purring as it begins to bake you from the shoulders down. You reapply your makeshift sunscreen, which your guide claims is a mix of goose fat and ground date seeds. It smells like dessert and regret. You pass a small shrine nestled beside the water, little more than a pile of stones, but adorned with offerings, dried flowers, carved charms, and one very confused cat. It's licking a ceramic plate like it belongs there. It probably does. According to local legend, these riverside shrines protect travelers from Sobek, the crocodile god. Sobek is said to both guard and endanger life, much like modern airline snacks. People still argue whether his worship was more about fear than love. Either way, you nod respectfully toward the shrine, just in case. The oars slow. Your guide announces you'll be stopping soon, for food, water, and to let the boatmen stretch their legs. You're tempted to keep moving, but he insists. "Even the Nile needs to breathe," he says cryptically. As the boat drifts toward the next bend, you glance back. The rising sun now sits fully above the horizon, casting long golden trails over the water. There's a stillness here, a silence that feels older than language. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and feel the heartbeat of the river. It's only the beginning, and already, you're not the same person who stepped onto this boat. The boat scrapes softly against the muddy shore, and your guide hops off with the spring of someone who's done this 1,000 times. You, however, disembark with all the grace of a stunned goat. Your sandals stick to the damp earth with each step, and you instantly regret wearing whatever you're wearing, which is probably linen, and which is now probably also see-through. The morning is warming fast. Overhead, palm fronds sway lazily in the breeze, creating pockets of dappled light that offer no real relief from the heat, but do look nice in photos, if you had a camera, which you don't. Welcome to 2500 BCE, where the only Instagram is carved in stone. You stretch your arms and follow your guide toward a small cluster of palm huts nestled just beyond a patch of papyrus thickets. Smoke rises from one, thin and blue. A few locals glance up from their tasks, kneading bread, sharpening tools, swatting flies, then go right back to what they were doing. A foreigner showing up by riverboat isn't that unusual here. You're just one more oddity in a land full of divine crocodiles and cat-loving royalty. Your guide introduces you to an older woman with a sun-worn face and arms like braided rope. She's tending a clay oven and gestures for you to sit on a reed mat beside her. You do, careful not to knock over a bowl of what appears to be crushed locust. Nope. Lentils. You hope. She offers you breakfast. Flat bread warm from the oven, dipped into a bowl of lentil mash, flavored with wild herbs and, surprise, fermented fish sauce. It's savory, tangy, and better than you expected. You nod enthusiastically, mouth full. She smiles, revealing 3 teeth and the expression of someone who's outlived 2 floods and at least 1 pharaoh. Nearby, a young boy tosses pebbles into the water, laughing as a crocodile lazily glides past. You blink. Yep, that's a crocodile. And it's huge, possibly older than your entire family tree. It doesn't seem particularly interested in eating anyone today. But still, you instinctively pull your toes further back from the shore. Your guide catches your look and grins. They say if a crocodile ignores you, it means you're blessed by Sobek. You're not sure if he's comforting you or setting you up for a slow roast later. Fun fact, ancient Egyptians did revere crocodiles, and in some regions, they even mummified them. Temples to Sobek were filled with embalmed reptiles in little linen wraps. Some people kept baby crocodiles as pets. Historians still argue whether this was more a show of reverence or an elaborate flex. You rise from breakfast and stroll a short way along the riverbank. A thick scent wafts through the air, sweet, resinous, and floral. Your guide picks a handful of crushed blue lotus petals from a shallow bowl set beside a nearby shrine. "Smell," he says. You do. It's intoxicating, light, dreamy. "It makes the mind float," he says. You nod. He adds, "Also, it's mildly psychoactive. But who's counting?" In the distance, you hear rhythmic thuds, like someone hammering wet clay. You follow the sound until you find a cluster of men building a boat. It's still skeletal, just the ribs, made from bundles of papyrus lashed together with palm rope. A craftsman waves at you, then gestures toward the half-built boat and says something that sounds suspiciously like, "You want to try?" Moments later, you're holding a bundle of reeds, sweat already pooling in your lower back. The boat builder laughs kindly as you try to mimic the twisting motion of the rope tie technique. It's harder than it looks. You fail spectacularly. The bundle unravels immediately and smacks you in the face. "Stick to floating, not building," your guide says, absolutely unhelpful. To cool down, you return to the boat, passing under the shade of a massive sycamore fig. The tree is covered in offerings, bits of linen, feathers, a carved scarab amulet hanging from one of the lower branches. Your guide touches the bark reverently. "They say spirits live in this tree," he whispers. "Some good, some mischievous. If you dream of a fig, it means you'll meet someone important." You make a mental note never to eat figs again. As the boat pushes off once more, the river widens, sparkling in the sunlight like scattered silver. On the far bank, a cow stares mournfully into the distance while chewing something that's probably not a philosopher's sandal, but you wouldn't bet against it. "Want to try steering?" your guide asks suddenly, handing you the oar. You nod, take it, and immediately regret everything. The oar is heavy. The boat resists. Your strokes send you turning slowly in the wrong direction. The boatmen let out a few polite chuckles, then step in before you crash into a floating log. Or wait, was that a hippo? You squint. It's gone. Probably a log. Definitely. You collapse onto your mat, mildly winded from your 30-second oar career, and sip more of the barley drink. This time it's colder, and they've added crushed dates. It's almost refreshing. As you drift further downriver, you pass a flock of flamingos standing perfectly still in the shallows. Their bright feathers look absurdly out of place in the sandy landscape, like someone spilled a Renaissance painting into the desert. Flamingos were sacred in some places, your guide says, but others thought they were just weird birds that stood too long. Historians still argue whether their depiction in tomb art was symbolic, or just a sign the ancient Egyptians appreciated good neck posture. By mid-morning, the riverbanks grow quieter again. The villages fall behind, and wild papyrus dominates the landscape. The breeze shifts, bringing the distant scent of incense and salt. Somewhere far away, drums thud faintly. Perhaps a ritual, or a wedding, or maybe just someone beating laundry rhythmically with a stick. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of the boat lull you. The Nile glides on. Time drips away like honey, thick and golden. You're not even halfway through the journey. And yet, already, the modern world feels like a strange dream you once had. The shadows grow longer on the east bank as you approach something massive rising in the distance. A structure of stone that doesn't belong to the landscape, not the way the palm trees and sandbanks do. It's a temple. One of the older ones, your guide tells you, even though it still looks like it could squash a modern building with one column tied behind its back. From this distance, it's a set of towering silhouettes. As you get closer, details emerge. Colossal statues flanking the entrance, one missing a nose, naturally. Faded paintings on outer walls, and a monumental gate shaped like an open rectangle. A pylon, your guide calls it. You nod like you totally knew that. Temple of Khnum, he says. The ram-headed god of creation. He shaped people on a potter's wheel, like clay pots, except human. He gestures vaguely at your face. Some he took his time with. Some, not so much. Okay, you're choosing to believe that was a joke. The boat drifts into a shaded inlet beside the temple's landing dock, where priests in white linen robes are lighting long-stemmed torches and carrying baskets of offerings. Dried flowers, polished stones, even a goose or two that look less than thrilled about their career path. As you step onto the stone dock, the air changes. Cooler, thicker, fragrant with incense that clings to your skin and sneaks into your lungs like it's trying to rewrite your dreams. You pass through the outer court, where pigeons flutter from cornices and a dog, yes, a literal temple dog, yawns without concern for the sacred space. A priest nods at you and gestures you into the hypostyle hall. You enter. It's dark and cool, a cathedral of pillars. Each column is carved top to bottom with hieroglyphs and crowned with a painted lotus or papyrus capital. The ceiling is low enough to press down on your shoulders, or maybe that's just the weight of the centuries. Faint chanting echoes through the stone. In the flickering torchlight, the walls come alive. Figures of gods with animal heads, kings offering jars to the heavens, serpents winding through the underworld. You see Anubis weighing a heart. You see Horus, falcon-eyed, striking down some cosmic chaos. You see yourself, suddenly very aware of how small you are. You can speak to the god, the priest says. He places a small lotus flower in your hand and leads you to a painted niche near the back of the sanctuary. There, hidden in shadow, is the statue of Khnum, ram horns curling from his head, eyes blank and kind of terrifying. You place the flower on a worn stone step and close your eyes. It's not that you expect anything to happen, but the silence here is so thick, so ancient, it makes you believe, for just a moment, that the god might be listening. You open your eyes to find your guide standing behind you with a candle and a smirk. "Still breathing?" he asks. "Barely." As you leave the inner chamber, a priest with a chest full of amulets offers you a sip of a dark red liquid. "Sacred pomegranate wine," he says. You hesitate. He grins. "It's strong, Just enough to see the gods, not enough to fight them. You sip. It's syrupy, spiced, with a bitter aftertaste that reminds you of honesty and poor decisions. You're definitely not steering the boat after this. Outside the temple, you follow a narrow path up a nearby hill. The view from the top is pure postcard. The Nile winding like a slow ribbon, fields patchworked with green and gold, date palms dotting the shoreline, and the temple behind you, nestled in shadow. There's a stone bench under an acacia tree. Your guide sits. So do you. See that? He says, pointing to a cluster of faint, angular shapes in the distance. Old workers' village. The people who built the temples lived there. They weren't slaves, you know. Paid labor. Good food, beer rations, even health care. Historians still argue whether it was socialism or just smart management. You nod slowly, absorbing the fact that ancient Egyptians might have had better job benefits than you. As the sun dips lower, the air cools. A boy runs past with a goat on a rope. The goat is clearly winning. A woman carries a basket on her head, walking with the kind of balance that defies physics. A group of children giggle as they splash each other near the riverbank. You hear a drumbeat. Farther down the hill, a group of villagers has gathered. You approach cautiously, catching the scent of grilled fish and roasting onions. It's a community meal, offerings shared among the living. You're offered a skewer of something smoky and delicious. You accept it without question. Later, you find out it was grilled duck heart. Still worth it. An old man with one tooth and a lyre begins playing. A slow, looping tune. Another joins with a drum. A young girl dances, her feet kicking up dust in rhythmic bursts. The music isn't loud. It's not polished, but it moves through your ribs like it belongs there. Someone hands you a small clay bead on a string. For protection, they say, against bad spirits and stomach cramps. Back at the boat, the torches are lit. The crocodiles have vanished into the dark. The stars are starting to peek out one by one, like curious gods. You lie back on your mat, flower still in hand, and watch the temple shrink behind you as the boat drifts onward. Somehow, the statue of Khnum still feels like it's watching you. You wake with a start, not from danger, but from laughter. The boat has stopped again, tied off to a crooked tree that leans over the water like it's had a long day. On shore, a group of villagers has gathered under a canopy of date palms, sharing something from a large clay jug that's clearly making everything funnier than it should be. Your guide waves you over. "Time to stretch your legs and your smile," he says. You step onto the soft sand, and immediately your foot sinks into a hidden patch of mud. Great start. A teenager nearby snorts in amusement and tosses you a small towel. Welcome to the party. There's a circle of mismatched stools and woven mats laid out beneath the trees. In the middle sits a woman with a ladle, doling out what she calls palm wine, but which tastes suspiciously like fermented sugar mixed with melted raisins and regret. Still, after 2 sips, you don't really care anymore. It's warm, it's sweet, and it's got a kick that turns the edges of the world pleasantly fuzzy. A man nearby leans in and says something in rapid Egyptian. Your guide translates. He wants to know if you're a spy. You laugh. The man squints at you. Your guide leans in again. That wasn't a joke. The locals aren't unfriendly. They're just curious. You're clearly not from around here. Your skin tone is wrong, your linen's too clean, and you keep staring at bugs like they're from Mars. But you're polite. You're not interrupting anyone's dinner, and you brought your own towel. So, you're tolerated. Almost liked. One older man, teeth stained brown from chewing some mystery root, leans back on his elbows, and starts telling a story. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm is unmistakable. It's a dirty joke. The villagers erupt in laughter at the punchline. Your guide translates. It involves a donkey, a pharaoh, and a very unfortunate pot of honey. He adds, "You don't want to know the details." You agree. Laughter in ancient Egypt, it turns out, sounds just like laughter today. Sloppy, sudden, and contagious. You relax into it, finally feeling like you belong. Or at least like you're not being actively cursed. Children dart between the adults, kicking a leather ball made of bound rags. One nearly crashes into you, giggling as he goes. Another is trying to ride a chicken. The chicken seems surprisingly okay with this. You're handed a small bowl of food, mashed fava beans, sprinkled with salt and coriander, served with warm bread straight from a clay oven. It's earthy, smoky, and deeply satisfying. This is what most people eat, your guide says. Every day. Beans, bread, beer. You raise an eyebrow. Okay. And the occasional donkey honey incident. As you sip more palm wine, the conversation drifts toward gossip. A woman says something to your guide, who snorts and covers his mouth. She says the village priest's new cat is possessed. It yowls only during moonrise and stares into water for hours. You consider that for a moment. Honestly, that sounds like a regular cat. A younger woman, perhaps 16, proudly shows you a set of painted ivory combs she made. They're carved with delicate images, birds, flowers, geometric patterns. She wants to sell them at market, your guide says, or marry someone rich enough to just buy her a mirror. You admire her ambition. You ask about makeup, half jokingly. Your guide grins and points at a nearby table where a small mirror shard lies, beside jars of green and black powder. Kohl for the eyes, he explains. Keeps out glare and bad spirits, and it makes you look mysterious. You try some. Now your eyes sting, and you look like you've been punched by a very fashionable ghost. Still, points for authenticity. As the sun dips behind the western bank, land of the dead, remember? Someone brings out a flute. A slow, lilting tune fills the air. A few people begin clapping along. You join in, a beat late, but no one minds. A goat tries to eat your robe. Again. As darkness deepens, torches are lit. Long reeds dipped in animal fat, sputtering softly as they burn. Shadows dance on the trees, flickering across the faces of the villagers. Someone starts singing, a repetitive chant that winds like the river itself, ancient and hypnotic. Palm wine continues to flow, and now there's date wine too. It's richer, thicker, and has the same "you'll regret this in the morning" undertone. You sip anyway. You're far past the point of pretending to be modern. Your guide leans over. They want to know if you'll dance. You're about to decline when a child grabs your hand and pulls you up. You end up stumbling through a series of steps that involve more clapping than actual footwork. But hey, it counts. The circle cheers you on, and someone slaps your back with enough force to bruise history itself. This is joy. Simple, earthy, and unfiltered by time. You forget the centuries. You forget the cameras, the screens, the content. You're just a traveler under the stars, dancing beside a river with strangers who somehow feel like old friends. Eventually, the fire dies down. People begin to drift away, yawning and laughing softly. A few curl up right there on the mats, using each other as pillows. The kids finally run out of energy. Even the goat seems ready to call it a night. Back on the boat, You collapse into your pile of blankets and sigh. Your legs ache, your face hurts from smiling, and your brain is just wine and moonlight. Somewhere on the shore, a jackal howls, long and low. "Don't worry," your guide murmurs. "He's just telling the spirits it's bedtime." You believe him, mostly. You wake to noise, not the gentle splash of oars or the hum of a flute, but chaos. The full, glorious din of human ambition compressed into a riverside market. Your boat has docked beside a sprawling bazaar, the kind that sprouts up wherever goods, gossip, and goats are in plentiful supply. You barely step off the gangplank before a child tries to sell you a clay amulet shaped like a cat. You're not even wearing shoes. It's not yet mid-morning, but the place is alive in all directions. Stalls crowd the riverbank, shaded by palm frond canopies and patched linen tarps. The air is thick with smells: grilled onions, animal sweat, fresh bread, sour beer, hot dust, and something sweetly floral that turns out to be dried lotus petals burned in tiny incense braziers. You inhale and nearly sneeze your brain out. Your guide doesn't slow down. "Stay close," he calls over his shoulder, "or you'll end up accidentally married to a fishmonger's daughter." You don't ask if he's joking. You just stay close. You pass baskets of pomegranates so red they look fake, strings of dried fish hanging like scaly curtains, amphorae sealed with beeswax, labeled in hasty hieroglyphs. You recognize the signs for oil, beer, honey, and, somewhat alarmingly, sacred crocodile bile. Your guide pats it fondly. "Good for hangovers," he says. You take 2 steps back. To your right, a potter kicks at his wheel, hands deep in spinning clay. He's making small dishes with ridiculous speed, one every 2 minutes, and shouting at his apprentice, who appears to be sculpting something that looks more like a melted camel. He's new, your guide notes. Let him dream. At a nearby stall, a woman is selling cosmetics. Powdered malachite for eyes, ground red ochre for lips and cheeks, and crushed carob pods for scent. She gestures for you to try. You hesitate, but your guide shrugs and says, "You've already survived fermented duck heart. Might as well glam up." You let her apply kohl to your eyelids with a tiny reed stick. It tingles in a slightly worrying way, but she seems pleased. She gives you a polished bronze shard to check your reflection. Honestly, you look fierce, like a warrior poet with insomnia. Further on, the market grows louder. The crowd swells. There's a man loudly arguing about the price of a goose, waving his arms so wildly that the goose gets free and waddles off indignantly. A woman with henna-covered hands is shouting about fake lapis lazuli. Apparently, some vendors have been passing off blue-dyed limestone as the real deal. And then there's the fishmonger. You smell his stall before you see it. He's filleting Nile perch with a speed that borders on supernatural. Guts fly. Scales sparkle in the air. He sees you and grins, lifting a particularly large specimen. "This one's lucky," he calls. You smile nervously and pretend to study a nearby basket of onions. "Just don't make eye contact," your guide advises. "Or he'll name the fish after you and declare it fate." You wander into a quieter corner of the market where scribes have set up shop. Rows of papyrus scrolls, ink pots, and reed pens are arranged neatly on mats. One scribe, an elderly man with a long, ink-stained beard, offers to write your name in hieroglyphs for a price. You agree, and he begins the careful strokes. A reed, an owl, a ripple of water, and something that might be a loaf of bread or a broken nose. You don't ask. He offers you a scroll containing what he claims is a love poem of the 18th dynasty. Your guide scans it and snorts. That's not a love poem. That's a tax complaint. You buy it anyway. Still romantic, in a tragic sort of way. Behind the scribe stalls, you find a group of musicians. A harpist strums a languid tune, while a drummer taps out a slow, hypnotic beat. One man plays a flute, his cheeks puffing like a frog. The music wraps around you like sunlight on water. People pause to listen, dropping coins, or at least smooth stones, into a bowl. And now, the sun is high. The heat has turned the air syrupy. Even the chickens are walking slower. You retreat into a shaded corner where a vendor is selling clay cups filled with cool tamarind drink. It's tart, refreshing, and cuts straight through the sweat clinging to your spine. Your guide returns, holding a small, flat cake wrapped in fig leaves. "Try it," he says. You do. It's dense, slightly gritty, and intensely sweet. "Tiger nut cake," he explains. "Very fashionable. Probably terrible for your teeth." Nearby, two women are whispering in the shadows of a linen stall. Your guide leans in and listens shamelessly. "Apparently the high priest's niece just eloped with a fisherman." You blink. "She took 3 jars of date wine and her father's best sandals." You blink again. "The fisherman's boat sank immediately after." You just stop blinking altogether. Historians still argue whether it was love or poor flotation engineering. A large gong rings from somewhere deeper in the market, and the crowds begin to shift. "Midday rest," your guide says. "No business under Ra's blazing eye." You nod. The sun is directly overhead, baking the streets like brick ovens. Even the shouting quiets. Merchants pull down their awnings, tie up their goats, and retreat into shady nooks. You follow your guide through a maze of tents until you reach a shaded platform by the river. Someone has set up low stools and mats, shaded with reed fans. You sit. You exhale. You drink more tamarind. Your bones hum from the sensory overload. One of the musicians from earlier wanders over and begins tuning his harp again. He nods at you, then plays a soft tune. It doesn't sound ancient. It sounds eternal. Behind you, the Nile glistens. Boats drift by slowly, their sails flapping gently. The market, just minutes ago, a noisy circus, has faded into a sleepy, sun-drenched hum. You lean back and close your eyes, letting the sounds of the river and the fading scent of spiced fish lull you into the softest kind of peace. You survived the market. You're practically a local now. The midday rest doesn't last long. By the time the shadow of the reed canopy has shifted enough to tickle your feet, your guide is already motioning you toward the boat. "We're expected at the estate by sundown," he says, as though that means anything to you. You stand up slowly, brushing tamarind pulp off your robe, and follow him back to the dock. The Nile is still sluggish and shimmering under the sun, but now the current feels thicker somehow, as though the river knows where you're going and isn't entirely sure it approves. This part of the journey is quieter. Fewer market boats, no children yelling, just the soft splash of the oars and the occasional bird call, mostly ibis, and the oddly mournful cry of some unseen animal that your guide insists is probably just a hippo dreaming about revenge. On the west bank, a series of manicured gardens and high mud brick walls come into view. "That's it," your guide says. "The estate of Nebet-Ka, royal scribe and tax overseer." He says it with the tone of someone introducing an uptight uncle who might or might not arrest you. The boat pulls into a private dock where servants are already waiting. They're dressed in crisp linen, completely unbothered by the heat, and holding trays of cool water, papyrus fans, and, rather surprisingly, grapes. You're not sure if you're a guest or part of the scenery, but you smile, accept a fan, and pretend you've done this before. You're led through a garden path lined with flowering acacia trees and limestone sculptures of various animals, mostly cats. One statue has been lovingly repainted with what appears to be charcoal and someone's leftover eyeshadow. His daughter, your guide mutters. Very creative. The house itself is sprawling, a blend of shaded open-air courtyards and tall, airy rooms with whitewashed walls. Faint murals decorate the plaster. Geese, fish, lotus blooms. And in one corner, a painted scene of someone being slapped by what appears to be a baboon. Disciplinary parable, your guide says. We think. You're escorted to a reception chamber where the walls are lined with scroll racks, polished writing palettes, and jars of ink. A boy sits cross-legged on the floor, diligently copying something onto papyrus, tongue sticking out in focus. You glance over his shoulder. It's a shipping manifest for grain deliveries. He's doodled a duck in the margin. Respect. Nebet-Ka enters without fanfare. A tall man with a long braided wig and eyes like someone who can mentally calculate your net worth in 3 seconds. He greets your guide with a warm nod, then turns to you. You've brought me a visitor who looks sunburnt, underfed, and completely bewildered, he says. I like them already. You're offered a seat on a carved wooden stool and a small cup of something cool and pale. You sip cautiously. It's sweet, creamy, and made from tiger nuts and honey. Nebet-Ka watches you with amusement. Wealth is measured in how much honey one can waste, he says. You laugh. He doesn't. You quickly stop laughing. As the scribes continue their work, Nebet-Ka gives you a brief tour. You pass through rooms filled with scrolls, account tablets, letters, and even gossip notes. Yes, literal gossip. Informal correspondence, he clarifies, holding up a scroll. Lady Tia wore blue linen to the temple, and it did not flatter her hips. He shrugs. It's important to know things. There's even an entire shelf labeled Dream Logs. Apparently, people paid scribes to record their dreams and consult interpretations. If you dream of losing your sandals, Nebet-Ka explains, it means you've angered the gods, or just need new sandals. You pass a small courtyard where a group of scribes are training apprentices. The older ones are dictating aloud, while the younger ones furiously scribble, occasionally pausing to blow on their ink or swat flies. One scribe accidentally sneezes on his work and promptly gets whacked with a rolled-up papyrus. Accuracy is sacred, Nebet-Ka says, deadpan. As the sun lowers in the sky, the estate grows cooler. A servant brings out a plate of pickled radish, figs, and cheese wrapped in lotus leaves. You take a bite. It's salty, tangy, and exactly what you didn't know you were craving. A small cat hops up onto the bench beside you and begins eating straight off your plate. No one stops it. You assume that means it outranks you. Back in the reception hall, Nebet-Ka shows you a scroll written entirely in red ink. Reserved for divine utterances, he says, or for corrections when someone really messes up. He points at a corner where someone has drawn a tiny bird holding a sign that says, roughly, I regret everything. Later, he offers you a gift, a reed pen, carefully carved and wrapped in linen. This is from the marshes near Aswan, he says. Strong fibers, good for truth or lies. You thank him. He nods like he's just handed you a loaded wand. Before you leave, He insists on one last thing: reading your fortune. He opens a small chest, pulls out a handful of marked bones, and tosses them onto a painted mat. He studies the pattern for a long moment. "Your journey will be long," he says, and full of strange laughter. "You'll forget something important, but gain something stranger." You wait. "That's it," he says, then grins. "I could write it down, if you'd like." Outside, the river is glowing gold under the late sun. You say your farewells, thank the cat. It does not acknowledge you, and return to the boat with your reed pen and a slight headache from trying to interpret mystical sarcasm. As the estate slips behind you, your guide smirks. "He liked you," he says. "Didn't even threaten to curse you once." You hold your new pen up to the setting sun, watching it catch the light. "Truth or lies," he said. You wonder which one the Nile prefers. Evening on the Nile settles in like a silken veil. Warm, slow, and gold-edged. The sky bleeds from coral to violet, and the water responds in kind, rippling with color like a canvas. Someone's gently shaken. You lean against the boat's edge, the scent of warm clay and wild basil rising from the shore. Your guide hums softly, something ancient, you suspect, and just slightly off-key. The next stop is a small, fortified village nestled into a natural curve of the riverbank. As you drift closer, you spot low, square buildings pressed together like gossiping neighbors. Smoke curls from a few hearths, and the bleating of goats competes with someone yelling about lentils. You step ashore just as a bell rings. Not a metal one, but a hollowed gourd hung on a pole, thumped with a carved stick. Apparently, it means dinner. Your guide leads you through narrow alleys, past doorways strung with drying fish, rows of onions, and occasionally, herbs tied like trophies. Everyone here seems to be multitasking. Mothers weaving mats while breastfeeding, children chasing chickens while reciting multiplication tables, or something very similar, and a very intense old man who's counting barley grains and shouting "wrong" at no one in particular. You're ushered into a communal hall just as a fire is being lit in the center. It's simple, a sunken pit surrounded by low stools and a clay oven to one side. Flatbread is already sizzling. A girl no older than 10 is expertly flipping them with her bare hands. You try not to look alarmed. She notices, smirks, and flips one extra high. Show off. The meal is modest, but rich in flavor. Lentils stewed with garlic and coriander, roasted chickpeas, dates stuffed with crushed nuts, and thick slices of cucumber. You're handed a piece of flatbread still steaming from the fire. It's charred in places, soft in others, and utterly perfect. A sharp-eyed elder notices your hesitation and tears off a piece for you, muttering, "City hands." As you eat, someone brings out a small drum and begins a low, rhythmic beat. A woman starts to sing, her voice thin but sure, telling a story of two brothers who tried to outfish each other and ended up married to the same woman. It makes absolutely no sense, but everyone's laughing, including the goats, probably. You ask if this happens every night. Your guide nods. "Well, when we have enough lentils and no funerals." There's something deeply human in the way the night unfolds here. The walls are made of mud and straw, but they hold a warmth that even limestone estates can't match. You notice a mural painted in charcoal and berry juice. A Nile crocodile wearing what looks like a wig. "We call him Cousin Tutu," a boy explains proudly. "He's the village mascot. We paint him when we want good fishin' luck." One of the elders, wrinkled, stern-looking, with eyebrows like overgrown reeds, calls for silence. "Time for the beer test," he announces. Someone groans. Someone else cheers. A jug of thick, frothy liquid is brought out, clay mugs clinking like a warning. "Barley beer," your guide whispers. "Filtered through linen, mostly." You're handed a mug and take a cautious sip. It's warm, sour, and has the texture of oatmeal that gave up. Your face must betray something, because a nearby woman claps you on the back and says, "Better than crocodile pee, eh?" You smile, mouth still full of ancient disappointment, and nod solemnly. Yes, absolutely. By now, the fire's burned down to soft embers. The children have curled up in corners or fallen asleep in parents' laps. Someone's sharpening a fishing spear in the corner, more out of habit than necessity. The mood has shifted from celebration to something quieter, something sacred. You're invited to spend the night in a guest alcove, a small, elevated platform with a reed mat and a single linen sheet. Before you settle in, a woman brings you a small token, a carved ivory amulet in the shape of a lotus. "For sleep," she says, pressing it into your palm, "to keep the bad dreams from jumping on your chest." You hope that's metaphorical. You also hope you're not sharing a room with anyone named Bad Dreams. From your small window, you can just see the river, dark now, moon-silvered and humming with quiet insect life. Somewhere nearby, frogs are conducting a midnight opera. The occasional splash might be a fish, or Cousin Tutu. Lying down, you notice how the village breathes together. A unified rhythm of snores, shifting feet, and the occasional muttered dream. It's strangely comforting, like the whole place is one big organism, and you're just a quiet cell tucked inside for the night. Before sleep fully takes you, you recall a story your guide told by the fire. Something about a pharaoh who once disguised himself as a fisherman and lived in a village like this for 7 days, just to taste freedom. Historians still argue whether he really did it, your guide had said, or if it was just poetic propaganda. Either way, you understand the appeal. In this little corner of the world, everything feels slower, simpler, deeper, like the river has paused just long enough for you to remember how to breathe differently. You drift off with the lotus charm clutched loosely in your fingers, a belly full of lentils, and a mind full of stories that don't quite fit together. And that's okay. After all, not everything in history needs to make perfect sense. Some parts are just meant to be lived. You're awake before the sun, but not before the Nile. The river is already moving, soft, insistent, ancient. It hums beneath your boat like a living pulse. Someone offers you a strip of dried fig and a slice of yesterday's bread as a light breakfast, which is code for "we don't feel like cooking yet." You chew in silence as your boat pushes off once more, reeds brushing the hull like fingers waving goodbye. The early morning is cool, but that won't last. Your boat cuts through mist, the horizon smudged with watercolor pastels. And then, just like that, the sun breaks the surface, climbing over the east bank like it's done so 1,000 times before, and will 1,000 more. A golden disk in a land built for worship. The boatmen begin to sing. It starts low and breathy, a tune that stretches and curls like incense. It's a song older than some of the gods carved into cliffs along the riverbanks, yet their voices rise in harmony, melancholic and strong, like they're not singing to the Nile, but with it. You can't understand the words, but it doesn't matter. The melody seeps into your bones, soothing something you didn't realize was frayed. You sit back, eyes half closed, as the boat sways rhythmically. The plunk of oars, the soft splash of a startled fish, the far-off cry of a hawk. A breeze tousles your hair, bringing with it the smell of wild mint and river mud. Your guide joins you on the deck, sipping from a cracked ceramic mug. "You like the song?" they ask. You nod. "It's about a woman who married the river," they add, deadpan. "Didn't end well. Jealous crocodiles." You pause, trying to decide if that's a joke. It probably is. Probably. The Nile narrows slightly here, pushing you closer to the banks. You pass by sand-colored cliffs, where ancient tombs were carved right into the rock. Their entrances are small, square mouths yawning at the world, sealed long ago. No signs, no tourists, just shadow and silence. One of the boatmen makes a subtle sign with his fingers, a warding gesture. "Spirits sleep light this time of year," your guide murmurs, almost lazily. You nod like you believe them. A little later, you pass a boat headed in the opposite direction. Low, wide, painted with gaudy stripes. It's piled high with amphorae and jars sealed with wax and straw. A trader's vessel, returning from Thebes maybe. The crew gives your group a casual wave, and your boatmen respond with a bawdy joke about the size of their sails. "Friendly rivalry," your guide explains. "Unless it's tax season, then it's mostly fistfights." There's a lull in the day now. The heat hasn't yet reached its full, skin-sizzling crescendo, but it's trying. The water has gone still again. You rest your chin on your hand and let your gaze drift across the landscape. Goats scrambling up hillsides, children waving from muddy banks, the occasional half-collapsed shrine to a forgotten local deity. Even spot what looks like a pet monkey in someone's arms, wearing what might be a vest, or possibly a doll's shirt. Either way, that monkey's seen things. Then, the river opens up. You're in a wide basin now, calm and mirror-like. The world seems to pause. No waves, no wind, just glassy water reflecting the heavens above. It's here that the boat slows to a crawl, and even the boatmen fall silent. You sense it's a place of meaning. "Deepest part of the river," your guide whispers. "Nobody knows how far it goes down. Some say it never ends." You peer over the edge. The water looks black, not because it's dirty, but because it's old. There's a hush around it, a reverence. Your guide hands you a small bundle, lotus petals wrapped in linen. "Toss it in," they say. A thank you for safe passage. You do, and the petals vanish into the dark without a ripple, as if the river just accepted them. Historians still argue whether this spot was used for sacrifices. Your guide continues conversationally. People, animals, offerings, depends who you ask. Personally, I think it's just deep because the river got bored of being shallow. The sun climbs higher now, burning away the stillness. The basin narrows again, and life returns to the banks. Birds hopping across stones, water buffalo munching lazily, palm trees rustling with secrets. A fisherman stands waist-deep in the shallows, throwing a net so skillfully you'd think the Nile whispered fishing tips directly into his ear. A little boy nearby sees your boat and sprints along the shore, yelling, "Where are you going?" You shout back, "Down the Nile!" And he raises his hands like that's the best thing he's heard all week. Your guide stretches beside you, arms behind their head. "Some say these songs we sing, they're maps, just not the kind you read. You listen long enough, you'll know where you are, where you've been, and maybe where you're going." You nod, not because you fully understand, but because somehow it feels true. The sky fades to blue steel, and your boat glides on. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of the oars, the sway of the deck, and the echoes of that old song lull you into a quiet trance. The Nile's music is subtle. No drums, no trumpets, just heartbeats and boatmen, and the breeze in your ear, like a friend telling you a story they half remember. You feel it now. The river isn't just something you're on. It's something you're part of. A lifeline, a lullaby, a long, slow sigh that carries history in every drop. And tonight, it carries you. You wake to the smell of fish. Not unpleasant exactly, just very present. Briny, sun-warmed, possibly judging you. It mingles with the scent of old wood and fresh river water, a combination that's basically the perfume of Nile life. You're docked in a village so small, it doesn't seem to have a name. At least not one your guide can agree on with the boatmen, who bicker over pronunciations like it's a matter of national security. You're told the stop is for supplies, which seems to include onions, goat milk, 24 reed mats, and a goat who does not want to be here. While the crew argues over the best price for pickled fish, you wander. The houses here are simple, mud brick and thatched roofs, with doorways covered by woven reeds to keep out the heat. Children run barefoot across the dust, shouting greetings and daring each other to touch the boat, before sprinting away in fits of laughter. A girl offers you a handful of dates wrapped in a scrap of linen. You thank her in broken ancient Egyptian, or a butchered attempt at it, and she grins anyway. At the village center stands a sycamore fig tree, its trunk thick and ancient, its leaves casting generous shade. Beneath it, 3 elders sit playing a game with smooth stones and a board etched into the ground. They barely glance at you, except to murmur something to each other and chuckle. Your guide appears beside you like a shadow. They just said you walk like someone who doesn't know where their feet are. Charming. You offer to help carry supplies back, which earns you a bundle of onions larger than your head. As you trudge back to the boat, sweating and slightly weeping from the fumes, your guide casually says, "Did you know onions were used in mummification?" You stop walking. Yep, purifying. Also great in stew. Very versatile vegetable. One historical fact, checked. Back on the river, the heat builds. The sun overhead is a hammer, and the Nile answers with steam. Shade is more precious than gold now. You huddle beneath a fraying canopy, drinking something suspiciously herbal your guide swears keeps the stomach cool. It tastes like sadness and grass clippings, but fine, whatever. Around you, the river narrows again. Banks rise higher, more rugged, with occasional streaks of color where iron or copper stains the stone. Every now and then, a carved marker juts from the cliff. A faded face, a half-erased prayer, a warning perhaps. "Flood markers," your guide says, "from old dynasties, measured the height of the inundation." You nod, trying to look wise, even though your brain is mostly onion fog at this point. Historians still argue whether these flood levels were used for taxation or religious forecasting. They add, or both. Imagine being taxed based on how angry the gods were. You imagine it. It's awful. You sip your herbal misery. The river begins to bend now, winding like a great sleepy snake. Your boat follows its slow dance, drifting into wide loops that take hours to complete. It's hypnotic. You lose track of time. The crew sings again. Different songs now, louder, with claps and beats tapped against the hull. At one point, you pass a crocodile. It's sunbathing on a stone ledge like it owns the place, and maybe it does. It doesn't even flinch as you pass, eyes half-lidded, tail twitching with lazy menace. You and the beast lock eyes for a moment too long, and you remember the bit about crocodile dung sunscreen. You probably won't survive this, echoes in your mind. Fun fact, some locals still leave offerings to Sobek, the crocodile god. Just in case, says your guide. Hard to tell whether he ever clocks out. As the river rounds another bend, the wind picks up, and suddenly the boat is alive. Sails puffing, ropes creaking, crew yelling over the gusts. You lean into the spray, hair whipping back, eyes stinging with sun and water and thrill. And then, just as suddenly, it calms. You float past another temple, smaller this time, partially collapsed, but beautiful in its ruin. Palm trees push up through broken columns. Birds nest in niches that once held sacred statues. Vines curl through cracks like fingers reclaiming what was taken. You want to stop, to explore. But the river has other plans. Instead, your guide tells you a story. This temple was built for a forgotten goddess. No name survived, just the inscription. She who breathes over the river. Some say she controlled the wind. You glance around. The breeze rises again, gentle and cool. Coincidence? Your guide smirks. Or good PR? Evening approaches. The sky turns molten orange, streaked with plum and coral, reflecting off the water like someone spilled wine and gold into the Nile. The crew lights small oil lamps along the boat's edge, their flames flickering like fireflies. You eat dinner as the sun sinks behind the hills. A stew of lentils, herbs, and maybe goat. You hope not that goat. Someone plays a single-stringed instrument at the bow, a soft tune full of longing and old dreams. And then, silence. The boat slows and pulls near a cluster of reeds. The crew drops anchor. You're told it's not a village stop this time. Just rest. The river needs it. You lie back, arms behind your head, and watch stars prick through the sky. One by one, cautious and twinkling. The moon rises, full and fat, casting silver across the water. A breeze brushes your cheek like a whisper. You think of everything the Nile has shown you. Temples and tombs, gods and goats, songs and silence. Every bend in the river has felt like a step backward through time. You close your eyes, lulled by the water's hush and the creak of the boat's ropes. Somewhere nearby, a heron calls, and the Nile, eternal, inscrutable, keeps flowing. Dawn arrives slowly, like honey spreading across the sky. You wake to the boat gently rocking, the sound of ripples kissing the hull, and a crewman somewhere in the distance humming to himself as he boils water for morning tea. The reeds you docked near sway in rhythm, brushing against each other in a language older than words. No one rushes, not even the sun. You sit up and stretch, your joints quietly protesting, your spine crackling like ancient papyrus. Your guide hands you a cup, lukewarm tea that tastes like boiled cinnamon and hope, and says, "Today we reach the end." The end? Already? You're not sure what you expected. Maybe a glowing temple rising from the mist. Maybe a dramatic last battle between crocodile gods and sun spirits. Instead, the end is just the river, still flowing, still moving. You set sail again, the breeze picking up gently, the sails filling with a kind of reverence. The crew is quieter this morning, as if they too sense something sacred about this stretch of water. You pass fishermen casting nets with practiced grace, their bodies moving like choreography handed down through centuries. The sun glints off the surface in broken mirrors. each flash a blink from the past. The landscape widens here. The banks pull apart like curtains, revealing golden fields lined with palms and sycamores. Children wave from the shore. A farmer lifts his hand from the middle of a dusty field. An old woman throws seeds into the wind and smiles. The boat veers toward a cluster of ruins, your final stop, it seems. This one isn't a towering monument or a preserved temple. It's broken, overgrown, half swallowed by sand and grass. Just outlines of once proud walls, fragments of stone statues, columns that end midair. This was once a trade outpost, your guide explains as you step onto the bank. Centuries before Cleopatra, before Ramses, maybe even before writing. You look around. There's not much to see by tourist standards, but you can feel something. Under your feet, the ground is layered with forgotten lives. Mud brick foundations, worn pottery shards, ancient footprints turned to stone. One fact, the guide casually drops. This area still hides caches of buried ostraka, clay shards with scribbled notes, like ancient sticky notes. Shopping lists, love poems, tax complaints, real stuff. The kind of things museums forget. You crouch and gently brush a stone, wondering if someone once leaned here while arguing about goat prices. You meander through the ruins as if walking through memories. A breeze rustles the reeds, and you hear laughter. Faint. Not real, but not entirely imaginary either. You pause at a low stone bench beneath what once must have been an archway. Your guide sits beside you and points to the horizon. There, they say, is where the Nile branches out. The delta begins. You squint. The land does begin to fray ahead, channels splitting off, heading in different directions, like veins from a heart. The Nile has no clear finish, just expansion, multiplication. Historians still argue whether this region was ever a true political center, your guide murmurs, or just a logistical one. But maybe that's the same thing when the river is your god. You smile. It's hard not to romanticize it. Everything around you pulses with a kind of ancient grace. A bird cries above. A falcon, maybe. You watch it wheel through the sky before disappearing into the clouds. You and your guide sit in silence for a long moment. Then, almost too casually, they say, "Do you want to stay here, or go back upriver?" It's a joke. Probably. But for a moment, you think about it. About building a hut from palm fronds, fishing in the morning, writing love poems on clay shards, avoiding crocodiles, maybe even worshipping a wind goddess nobody remembers. You laugh. "No thanks," you say. "I'd miss the internet." Your guide shrugs. "Suit yourself." You climb back onto the boat for one last float. The crew doesn't sing this time, just works, silently, efficiently, like they've done this journey 1,000 times, maybe more. As the boat drifts into the beginning of the delta, the sky opens above you, a brilliant, blinding blue. You lie back one final time, head resting on folded cloth, hands folded over your chest like a statue in a forgotten tomb. You close your eyes and listen to the water, to the wind, to history breathing all around you. And the Nile, ever constant, ever changing, cradles you forward. The boat rocks slowly now, like it too is ready to rest. The river narrows behind you, its memories fading into distance, softened by the hush of night. The reeds grow quieter. The winds no longer tease your skin. They simply whisper, gentle and wordless, like the hush before a dream. Your limbs feel heavier, your breath slower. The weight of the day, the warmth of the sun, the soft exhaustion of wandering through someone else's history. They all begin to settle like silt beneath calm waters. Above you, the stars come out in careful order. No rush, no noise. Just pinpricks of timeless light, drifting across the sky like the boat beneath them. Somewhere, a heron flaps its wings once. Then stillness. You've been many places today. Across temples and tombs, past forgotten gods and playful children, through history's dust and laughter. But now, the only place left is here. This breath, this moment, this gentle drift toward sleep. Let the river carry you. Let the boat be your cradle, the breeze your blanket, the stars your silent sentinels. And as your thoughts slow, as your eyelids grow heavy, let the past recede into soft shadows, and the Nile's lullaby sing you to rest. Sleep now, traveler. The journey is over. The river still flows.